Well, the commission backed down because this was a colossal mistake, but you can understand where they were coming from. Just as a reminder, in order to finally break the impasse in 2019 for the Brexit divorce deal, they came up with a settlement for Northern Ireland in order to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland. They gave Northern Ireland a kind of halfway house status. It is in the EU customs union, but it's also in the United Kingdom. That creates a very vulnerable potential backdoor in that border between the EU and the UK. This was always going to be a problem. I'm personally just surprised that it flared up so quickly. The point of inserting this reference to Article 16 in the legislative text here, Article 16 was a provision that would allow for checks on that border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland in emergency circumstances. And the Commission was worried that if they do restrict vaccine exports, a company could just send their vaccines to Northern Ireland, because that's not technically an export, and then the vaccine could go on to the UK. The problem is this was enormously politically sensitive. The Commission didn't consult Ireland and the United Kingdom about this before doing it. And so it just looked incredibly ham-handed, especially considering that the EU for years now has insisted that any kind of border check on the island of Ireland was unconscionable, and then they go ahead and suggest doing it in this legislation. So after a huge pushback from the UK and Ireland, they walked this back. They removed that reference to Article 16 in the legislative text. I should point out, Article 16 was never actually triggered. This was removed from the text before it was actually published in the official journal. So in essence, it was at that point a kind of draft version. But this has done enormous communications damage for the Commission, and it's really distracted from the main message the Commission wanted to portray here, which is that the EU is the aggrieved party, having not getting all of its promised vaccines from AstraZeneca and suspecting that those promised vaccines went to the UK after they were produced here in the EU.
All right, so the EU has backed down over Northern Ireland and over vaccines going across that border, but there are export controls in place. Private drug companies will not be allowed to export their vaccines to dozens of countries around the world if the member state says that they haven't first reached their commitments to the EU. Is that right?
Yeah, the Commission says that an actual restriction here is very unlikely. This is basically an instrument that would give the EU the ability to restrict the exports. It's a time-limited instrument. It would only last till the end of March. And basically, the Commission thinks that just requiring the companies to declare their export intentions will be enough to stop this from happening, that the company basically wouldn't have the nerve to try to export vaccines out of the EU if it still owes the EU vaccine doses. But it does indeed give an EU member state the ability to restrict that export, so to not grant the export authorization if that company still owes vaccine doses to the EU. Now, obviously, this is mainly focused on AstraZeneca, although the Commission won't say that, because of this shortfall that AstraZeneca has announced, really just a quarter or something like that of vaccines that it had promised over these initial weeks. But other countries outside the UK are very worried that the EU could apply this to Pfizer. Pfizer also had shortfalls in the previous weeks. The company says it's back to 100% of delivery to the EU countries. But a plant here in Belgium makes the entire world's Pfizer vaccine supply outside of the United States. Even Canada gets its Pfizer vaccine from here in Belgium and not next door in the United States because of the strangeness of global supply chains. And so if the EU started restricting Pfizer exports, that would affect Canada, it would affect Australia, it would affect all of these wealthy countries. Developing countries have an exemption to this instrument, 97 developing countries, as do countries in Europe that have an official link to the European Union, like Switzerland, Norway, Western Balkan countries that are in the accession process. But UK is not on that exemption list. Russia is not on that exemption list. And so I think for AstraZeneca, That's the more likely way this would be used, although the Commission still says that possibility is remote. I'm sure they would say that the possibility of it being used against Pfizer is even more remote, an infinitesimal chance. But if it was used, you would see huge pushback, I think particularly from Canada. Canada's really worried about this in terms of Pfizer. So it will be interesting to see how this plays out. Again, the Commission thinks just having to declare the export information will be enough to stop companies from exporting doses out of the EU that were intended for the EU.
Dave, thank you very much indeed. Dave Keating there.